Hello everybody, this is Dragyn here, back in the Dragon's Den. Pull up a seat and have a drink of your choice. It's morning for me right now, so coffee's mine, but there's lots of others there available for you. We are doing something a little different. I realize that I've talked a lot about Toastmasters and development, leadership, all that kind of stuff, so now I'm going to shift turns for a few more weeks here, and we're going to conquer some unique histories or some weird ones. And I've been looking into this quite a bit, and it's quite funny actually, some of the ones that have popped up, and I figured I'd start with one that's kind of unique. There is this article, which I'll post in the description below, that you guys can take a look at and read for yourselves, but it basically outlines a typical medieval shopping experience in this 14th century market. And it's really funny, and I've read through it briefly, but I figured I would go through it with you guys slowly, bit by bit, read it word for word, and then react to some of the things that they're talking about. Because history is such a cool thing, and you can really see how much civilization has grown and developed from such simpler quote-unquote times, when really, if you were living in that time period, some of these things were developing as they went. So for them it was exciting and new, kind of like currently right now, this thing about Bitcoin and NFTs. I don't know what your stance is on those. You can have a negative stance, you can have a positive stance, but just think about the weird development of where they came from and how it was born in today's society, and it's still something so new and it's constantly changing. That was what bartering in marketplaces were like for these people back way in the day. It's so cool to kind of put yourself in that position and be like, wow, we take this for granted for sure. So that's kind of the purpose as to why I like history, is going back and seeing, wow, they were genuinely excited about this simple exchange of goods when really we do it all the time. But this is where it came from, and it's kind of cool to see the history of development of certain things we take for granted daily. So let's dive in. So here's the article name. It's called The Medieval Marketplace, A Time Traveler's Guide to Shopping in the Middle Ages. Very cool. I like that title, especially because I love the Time Traveler's Guide to the Galaxy. I love that, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so it's a little play on that. But here we go, let's get started here. So like I said, I've only read very little of it, so a lot of this will be new, exciting information that we can go through together. So here we go. Here's how the article starts. How much did average items cost in a medieval market? And what was for sale? Ian Mortimer, author of The Time Traveler's Guide to the Medieval England, so he's the author of the article, upcoming, takes us on a shopping trip in a 14th century marketplace, from the sights and smells to how to avoid being conned out of your wages. Ooh, I love that. That's really intriguing. Oh, goodness. So, here we go. The poet W.H. Harden once suggested that in order to understand your own country, you need to have lived in at least two others. But what about your own time? By the same reckoning, you need to have experienced at least two other centuries. This presents us with some difficulties, but through historical research, coming to terms with another century is not impossible. We can approach the past as if it is really a foreign country, somewhere we might visit, and we do not actually need to travel in time to appreciate it. Just the idea of visiting the past allows us to see life differently and more immediately. Come shopping in the late 14th century and see for yourself. I like that. He basically summarized everything I just said in the introduction about, it's true, a lot of people say you can't really appreciate life really unless you live in different countries, and so far I've hit the thing on the nail. I've lived in Canada, I've lived in Mexico for a little short period of time. That was enough to start understanding the way things were. And I lived in the UK for 2 years. So that part's true, where you really appreciate your life a lot more when you start living your life differently and in different contexts. And I like what he says here. But by the same reckoning, you need to have experienced at least 2 other centuries. So again, going back into history and trying to really appreciate how people live their lives versus how you are living it right now. And that's what we're about to do with this article and episode today. It's a very cool thing to think about, and it's a really big concept as well. Really hard to put your head around that, but let's see how he does it. We're going to go walk through Ian Mortimer's shoes and his research and where it has led him. The medieval marketplace. Ribs of beef and many a pie, you hear someone call over your shoulder. Turning, you see a young lad walking through the street crowd bearing a tray laden with wooden bowls of cooked meats from a local shop. All around him, people are moving, gesturing, talking. So many have come in from the surrounding villagers that this town of about 3,000 inhabitants is today thronged with twice as many. Ooh, that's a lot of people if you think about it. 3,000 up to 6,000. That's hard to accommodate a lot of people. Here are men in knee-length brown tunics driving their cattle before them. Here are their wives in long kirtles with wimples around their heads and necks. Those men in short tunics and hoods are valets in a knight's household. Oh, cool. They had valet, the concept of a valet back then, where they take the horse and carriages and park them somewhere for whoever they're driving into town to spend the day in the town. That's unique that they have the concept of a valet back in the 14th century, so 1300s. Wow. Think about that, a valet, that concept from the 1300s. Crazy. Those in long gowns with high collars and beaver fur hats are wealthy merchants. Across the marketplace, more peasants are leading in their flocks of sheep or pack horses and carts loaded with crates of chickens. Cool. So definitely a very loud, noisy place if you've got a lot of chickens and horses and cattle. It would be like my farm on Stardew, where you can hear the cows go moo and the chickens go quack all the time, but just times that by like 100. Interesting. I'm setting the scene for you guys here. Crowds are noisy. People are talking so much that the chatter could almost be the whole purpose of the market. And in many ways, it is. This is the one open public area in the town where people can meet and exchange information. When a company performs a mystery play, it is to the marketplace that they will drag the cart containing their stage set and costumes. When the town crier rings his bell to address the people of the town, it is in the marketplace that the crowd will gather to hear him. The marketplace is the heart of any town. Indeed, the very definition of a town is that it has a market. Which makes sense, especially if let's say this is in England. England's a pretty small country. So in towns, they focus on buildings, residencies, that kind of thing. But as soon as you have an open square, that would be the place for markets, for selling, for bartering, for exchanging information, like they said. That's what that little space would be used for, to fill it with people, interesting things, the wares, information, news, and that's where it would be. It's very cool. It makes me appreciate the town squares I visited in places like Granada, Bath, London to an extent, although London's a huge, huge city, so you pick and choose where you go in London for that. Just even Swansea and a few other little places I went to, just the little marketplaces and squares that they had are very unique. Definitely recommend going. So let's see here. Well, you've just gotten used to the crowd and the noisiness, but what can you buy? Let's start at the fishmonger stalls. You may have heard that many sorts of fresh water and sea fish are eaten in medieval England. Indeed, more than 150 species, 150 species, are consumed by the nobility and churchmen, drawn from their own fish ponds, as well as the rivers and seas. That's crazy, 150 different kinds of species. It's a lot of fish. A lot of fish. But in most markets, it is the popular varieties which you see glistening in the wet hay-filled crates. Mackerel, herring, lampreys, cod, eels, Aberdeen fish, which looks like in modern day that'd be cured salmon and herring, and stockfish, which is salt cod, are the most common varieties. Interesting. So mackerel, herring, lamprey, cod, eels, salmon, herring, and other cods. Crabs and lobsters are transported live in barrels. That's right, because they came mainly from North America. Well, not quite North America in the 14th century, but other places that they've traveled in imperial rule. So they're transported live in barrels. In season, you will see fresh salmon, attracting the hefty price of 4 or 5 shillings each. A fresh turbot can cost even more, up to 7 shillings. Wow. So yeah, shillings would be like the equivalent to like gold, silver, copper coins, like in D&D. It'll be like that. So some of that could be really, really pricey for some of the peasantry or workers that didn't have high-paying jobs or roles. Next, we come to an area set aside for corn. Corn. I love corn. So there are sacks of wheat, barley, oats, and rye are piled up, ready for sale to the townsmen. Then, the space given over to livestock. Here we go, all the noisy animals. Are we ready for this? Goats, sheep, pigs, and cows. Oh my gosh. And chicken. That was mentioned earlier. Chicken. So look at that, all the Stardew animals, because we get chickens, cow, sheep, goat, and pig. Look at that. Stardew is based on like medieval England, confirmed. But very noisy, just meow, bakak, and ba, and like all the little sheep and goat noises. Interesting. A corner is then devoted to garden produce, so apples, pears, vegetables, garlic, and herbs. Yet, the emphasis of a medieval diet is on meat, cheese, and cereal crops. Makes sense, especially if they do have like a lot of livestock. I mean, if you think England or Wales or Scotland, you think sheep. So, absolutely, a lot of lamb and mutton. In a large town, so maybe a little bit bigger than a smaller city, you will find spicerers, selling such exotic commodities as pepper, cinnamon, so spices. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, licorice, and many different types of sugar. Interesting. So that's a really busy farmer's market, basically, if you think about it. That's a lot to sell and go through. Now these are only for the wealthy. When your average skilled workman earns only 2 shillings in a week, you can hardly afford to spend 4 shillings on a pound of cloves or 20 pence on a pound of ginger. So the items they just listed and went through are usually for the nobility and the upper class, not really your average man. Interesting. So basically, you take today's farmers markets where everyone here basically has equal access to the farmers market. But back then, these markets would be a place for the richer folk, for nobilities, for nobles, upperclassmen. That would be their niche, is these little markets that come to town. Interesting. But there's more. Of course there's more. The rest of the marketplace performs 2 functions. Producers come to sell fleeces, sacks of wool, tanned hides, furs, iron, steel, and tin for resale further afield. The other function is to sell manufactured commodities to local people. Brass and bronze cooking vessels, candlesticks and spurs, pewter ware, woolen cloth, silk, linen, canvas, carts, rushes for hall floors. I'm not sure what a rush is. I have to look that up. Glass, cigarettes, coal, nails, horseshoes, and planks of wood. Planks, you ask? Consider the difficulties of transporting a tree trunk to a saw pit and then getting 2 men to saw it in planks with only a handsaw between them. Yeah, so you have the markets that are dedicated to more of the nobility and try and definitely make a huge profit for the merchants. But then you have the other side of the market where they do sell to the everyman. And these items that I mentioned, like the furs, the hides, the wool, steel, tin, cooking vessels, candlesticks, spurs, pewterware, planks of wood, that would be for your average person to use in whatever craft they're doing, maybe, whatever trade they're in, or even just to survive and keep warm and make clothing and that kind of thing. It's very neat, very, very unique. So everyone in medieval society is heavily dependent on each other for such supplies, and the marketplace is where all of these independencies meet. So yeah, this is definitely like a market where you can find pretty much anything and everything, but you may not find more of the very fancier things, where in today's markets you can find like jewelry, handcrafted necklaces, paintings, that kind of thing. In these markets here, it's purely out of fancy eating for like the meats, cereal foods, and cheese, to survival food, basically, like the cheaper fruits and vegetables, to even just having your everyday needed things. So if you've got like a leak in your roof, you can go get planks of wood to help hopefully replace it and fix it. You can get cloth and silk and wool to make clothing, especially with winter. If it was coming up soon, you can get warmer and make warmer clothing. Glass, cod, coal, nails, keep coal for fires, keeping warm, all those ideas, and for cooking as well. Horseshoes, which could just be for horses for sure, or even for your little ones to play. So it's definitely an interesting and different kind of market than what we would see today for sure. But the idea of a market stays the same, pretty much. In terms of when merchants, aka vendors, want to sell and make a profit and earn a living, that's what they go to, is markets for it. Although I suppose nowadays there's Etsy and a few other places like that Redbubble that you do that same thing for, basically. It's very interesting though. The next part of this article here is all about haggling, so negotiating on the fly, being very good, charismatic, and persuasive here. I'm really interested about this part of the article here. So, haggling. Essential items, such as ale and bread, have their prices fixed by law. Which makes sense, and that is something. I think they keep that pretty well established for quite a number of years, because that happened, well, one of the reasons for the French Revolution was the big tax on bread and the inflation of bread prices. So there's that for sure. I knew that. I don't know if you guys knew that, but bread inflation was a huge thing about a couple hundred years after this. So those prices, so ale and bread. I love how essential item is considered ale. Yeah, so crazy. I don't think we consider ale essential nowadays, unless you're talking to people who drink a lot and like to drink, but definitely not as essential as it was back then. Yet, for almost everything that's been manufactured, you will have to negotiate. I want to pause and think about that sentence. You will have to negotiate. It's not a thing of going, oh, so that's 2 shillings? Great, here you go. It's a part of their culture to haggle, to negotiate. So, interesting. Caxton's 15th century dialogue book is based on a 14th century language guide and gives the following lesson on how to haggle with a cloth vendor. So this next dialogue here is 14th century English, so it's not going to make a lot of sense, but we'll give it a try. Dame, what hold ye the ell of this cloth, or what is worth the cloth whole? In short, so to speak, how much the ell? So there's little brackets here. L is a measurement, and it looks like it's about 45 inches of a length of cloth. Sire, reason, ye shall have it good and cheap. Yea, truly for cattle, dame, ye must me win. Take heed what I shall pay. 4 shillings for the ell, if it please you. For so much would I have good scarlet. But I have some which is not of the best, which I would not give for 7 shillings. But this is no such cloth of so such money, that know ye well. Sire, what is it worth? Dame, it were worth to me well 3 shillings. That is evil bodden. But say, certainly, how shall I have it without a part to leave? I shall give it ye at one word. Ye shall pay 5 shillings, certainly, if ye have them for so many ells, for I will abate nothing. Interesting. So it goes back and forth there a little bit, about 4 shillings, up to 7 shillings, and then back down to 5 shillings. And they're trying to debate the quality of the cloth in this statement here. Like, oh, this is like very good quality, so you'd be very lucky to have it at 4 shillings. And then the lady goes, but I'm not sure if it's as good. Then the guy was like, but if it was any better quality, it would be 7 shillings. So it's not as fine as you think it is. And she's like, well, if it's not as fine, I should have a lower price. And then it goes down to 5 shillings. Oh, I love it. It's very interesting. Okay. And so, you open your purse, which hangs from the cords attached to your belt, and find 5 shillings. Except that there is no shilling coin in the late 14th century. The smallest gold coins are the half noble. So 3 silver, 4 something else here. I wish I knew what the D was. So the smallest gold coins are the half noble and the quarter noble. So if you have one each of these, you can make up the sum. Alternatively, you will have to make it up from the silver coins: groats, half groats, pennies, halfpence, and farthings. Whoa! There's so many different coins back in medieval England. So they said here, half noble, quarter noble, groats, half groats, pennies. So pennies have been around since the 14th century, guys. Wow. Halfpence, pence is still a thing here in the UK, and farthings. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different coins you could have. And you'd have to play around with how much would make up a shilling. Crazy. So, oh, that's so cool. The next section here is they have how much did medieval shopping items cost. And so these are prices in about the 1390s. So 14th century, late 14th century. And it says prices are from the account books of Henry of Lancaster, Earl of Derby. Cool. So there's actually written accounts of these prices. So these prices are known and were established. Crazy. Okay, so except I'm very confused what the D stands for. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'll just go through it. So ale, so ordinary ale was about 3/4 D, so it's about 1 full D per gallon. So whatever D is that... No, I don't see what the D stands for here. That's really annoying. But whatever, so 3/4 to 1. Oh, maybe that's shillings. So 3/4 shilling to 1 shilling would be per gallon of ordinary ale. Wine from Bordeaux, so France, would be 3 to 4 shillings per gallon. Bacon, oh, bacon's expensive, 15 shillings per side. Chicken was 2 shillings each. Fresh cod, 20 shillings. A loaf of sugar, that sounds, a loaf of sugar, is 18 shillings per pound. Apples, 7 per 100 or per 100. Damn. Eggs were 33 shillings for 425 eggs. Damn. A furred gown was 5 shilling. Oh, sorry, so maybe 5 shilling 4 pence? Maybe the D is pence? I'm not too sure, unfortunately, guys. I'll have to look that up, maybe. Or maybe we'll talk about it a bit further. Okay, so here we go. Wages and salaries now in the 1390s. And this is written in actually the British pound. So I'll give you that here a little bit. So the king's physician, so he's the actual king's doctor, gets only £40 per year. £40. So almost $80 Canadian per year. Crazy. Okay, officers in the royal household get £20 per year. £20, 20 quid per year. We'll go 20 quid. That's easier to say. A mason is 8 quid per day. Or 8 quid per year, 6 something per day. Carpenter only 4 1/4 D per day, so whatever that D stands for. Thatcher, 4 1/4 D per day. Laborer, 3 1/4 per D per day. Valets in a lord's household gets £1 10 shilling per year. Wow, £1 10 shilling per year to drive a noble around the town. Crazy. A manservant in a yeoman's household is £1 per year. Maid servant in a yeoman's household, 10 shilling per year. So look at that gap between men and women, even in the modern medieval world. 10 shilling versus £1. That's crazy. In old money, there were 12 pence to the shilling and 20. Oh, so the D is pence. Okay, so let me go back and go through this all with you. It'll make way more sense now that I know that D stands for pence. I should have went down to the bottom for the little guide here. So yeah, let's go back real quick. So ordinary ale was between a 3/4 pence and 1 pence per gallon. Wine from Bordeaux were 3 to 4 pence per gallon. Bacon, 15 pence per side of bacon. Chicken was 2 pence each. Fresh cod, 20 pence. Loaf of sugar was 18 pence per pound. Apples were 7 pounds per 100. Eggs, 33 pence for 425 eggs. That's a lot of eggs, man. And a furred gown was 5 shilling 4 pence. So going back through the wages and salaries, the king's physician, 40 quid per year. Officers in the royal household, 20 quid per year. Mason, 8 quid per year, which equals about 6 pence per day. A carpenter would make 4 1/4 pence per day. Thatcher, 4 1/4 pence per day. Laborer, 3 1/4 pence per day. Valets in a lord's household, 1 quid 10 shilling per year. Manservants, 1 quid per year. Maid servant, 10 shilling per year. And to break it down even further, 1 shilling would equal 12 pence. And 20 shillings would make up 1 quid or 1 pound. So that really shows you that the maid servants only made half a quid for a whole year. So they made exactly half of what a male servant would make. That is crazy. Could you imagine living on those wages today? Oof, that would be impossible. And for some of these guys, it would be impossible to live on that per day. But, I mean, even these roles, though, are pretty, key roles. So you would still be able to afford some of this food per week, but not all of it. That is pretty eye-opening. So the carpenter, let's say there's a market that happens twice a week. And so in 1 week, he would make, oh, this is a lot of math. Forgive me. So 8.5, 17, sorry, 2, 4, 21, quarter. So they would get 25.5 pence per week. And so let's say they go to the market twice. That's not a lot of things they would be able to get. They'd be able to get their ale easily, and they'll be able to get their ale easily. Apples, probably very easily. And and maybe the chicken and bacon. Maybe the bacon, but the bacon's pretty expensive. So they get their ale, chicken, and apples potentially. That's about it. That's all they would be able to get on that wage. The rest of it would be just out of reach. Or they could get it, but be very short everything else. That's insane. Put in that perspective, life was hard for the average worker, like the laborer, thatcher, carpenter. That is a lot. That's really rough. Even for a mason, because they get six pence per day. So 6 times 7 is 42. They'd only have 42 per week to spend on all these things here. Wow, that's crazy. Dang. You'd have to really budget your coins in that matter. Well done. Well, it's very interesting. So now into maybe not the most exciting part of this article or the most wow factor, but it's the regulations and how a market is ran. So it's very interesting. To me, I find this part stuff interesting because it's all about the rules, regulations, where can you sell, what can you sell, that kind of stuff. I'm intrigued about this because online, you can almost sell anything online currently. But back then, who knows what the regulations are. So let's go into it. A well-run market is crucial to the standing of a town. Thus, it is heavily regulated. The actual policing tends to be undertaken by the town's beadles or bailiffs, who enforce regulations like no horses may be left standing in the marketplace on market days. So people who live surrounding the market, they're not allowed to keep their horses there on market days. And every man is to keep the street in front of his tenant clean. Oh, that's an interesting rule. They have to make their town look really nice and clean to ensure people come and visit and want to come back and visit. That's nice. That's an interesting rule there. Most towns have between 40 and 70 regulations, and those breaking them are taken to the borough court and fined. Whoa! 40 to 70 little rules like that to follow on market days. Wow. That's crazy. There are reasons to be grateful for the supervision of trade. Short measures are a notorious problem, and turners normally have to swear to make wooden measures of the appropriate size. Clerks in borough courts will tell you of cooking pots being made out of soft metal and coated with brass. Oh, they're trying to trick them. And loaves of bread baked with stones in them to make them up to the legally required weight. Oh. So if these people were making these goods and it didn't meet the proper standards, they couldn't sell them. So they would try to trick the clerks or the people in the court and in the marketplace just so they can get in the marketplace and sell something to make money. That's crazy. Stones and bread. That's a unique one. And soft metals instead of the hard metals you use for like pots and pans. Just using a softer metal that could easily degrade over time. Oof. It's quite interesting. Wool has to be stretched before it is woven to make it go further. but then it shrinks. Oh, that's right, because when you stretch out wool to clean it and make it into like the proper length before you wave it, it extends it and makes it look longer than it really is. It's kind of like when you get your hair cut. When you wash your hair and then you get it cut and you blow dry it, your hair gets shorter because once it's dry, it shortens. The same thing happens with wool is what they're saying. But a lot of the merchants here said that they would come in, have this wool fully stretched out to make it look like it's a lot and enough to sell. But really it isn't, because when it dries up, or before it gets woven, it gets it shrinks again. Interesting. That's so clever. Here's some more. Pepper is sold damp, making it swell way more and rot sooner. Oh, you tricky bastards. Oh my gosh. Because yeah, you're talking about like the big peppercorns. So those peppercorns, they make them wet because when things are wet, they usually expand because they're holding in a lot of moisture. But that means you only have like probably a day to use that. So if you buy too much pepper, probably half of it will rotten before you use it. That's wild to me. That's crazy. And meat is sometimes sold even though it's putrid. Oh, I don't know if I would want to buy rotten meat. I mean, it's bad enough that at my work we have something called flash food, where if a product expires very close or within like the next few days, they will put it for sale, like mark it 30% off. And sometimes I'll do that for some meat. Not all the meat, but some. Just to have like a nice meal that night. Like I would cook it that night. I wouldn't wait a few days until it expires to cook it. Unless you freeze it, then it's somewhat okay. But putrid meat. Oh God. I mean, if you're desperate for food, you're desperate for food. But ugh, that's a hard one to stomach. Wine. They also do wine even though it has turned sour. Ooh. And bread, but it has gone green. Yikes. Oh, goodness. If you are the victim of malpractice, you go straight to the authorities. The perpetrator will be pilloried, literally. The pillory is the wooden board which clasps the guilty man's head and hands. Oh, and shamefully exposes him to the insults of the crowd. Oh, so it's like wooden board that opens up and has like the 3 circles in it, 2 for your hands, 1 for your head. And they have those in the marketplaces. So if you report one of these merchants for tricking you or selling you something or malpractice, you can report them and they'd be publicly humiliated in those like little like jail wooden things that you see like in cartoons. They'd actually be put on display in the market. Oh gosh. And crowds would insult them. That is crazy. They did love their public humiliation though back in the day, that's for sure. A butcher selling bad meat can expect to be dragged through the streets of the town on a hurdle and then placed in the pillory with the rotten meat burned under him. Oh, that's rough. He's in those like wooden things I mentioned about. It's like the wooden things that clasp over your heads. And underneath him, they would cook and burn his like really gross, stinky, rotten meat in his face. And that's how he'd be punished. Oh, that's so funny. It would be awful, but very funny. Okay, and then here, a vintner caught selling foul wine is dragged to the pillory on a hurdle, forced to drink a draught of the offending liquor, and then set in the pillory where the remainder is poured over his head. The sweetness of the revenge makes up for the sourness of the wine. Whoa. So they make him drink a whole... to drink a draught of the offending liquor, so his own gross, sour wine. Drink that fully, and then they pour whatever he has left over his head. So then you're going to be sticky and gross while hanging in like those wooden stands. Oh, that's rough. Oh, these punishments are kind of funny though. I shouldn't be laughing. It would be an awful thing to go through, but I guess they deserved it back then for trying to sell a product that wasn't quality. That is so funny. Wow, that is so unique. Oh, sorry, I can't get over that. That really is funny to me. Oh, that's... See, instead of having jail and things like that in modern world, we should go back to this method. Just kidding, but wow. Okay, here we go. We begin to summarize the article here. So, shopping in the 14th century will often remind you of how much we have in common with our medieval forebears. It will likewise alert you to the huge differences between us. We are not the same as our ancestors. Look at how young they are. The median age in the market here is just 21. And look at the meager diets of the poor, their rotten teeth as they smile, their resilience in the face of death. Consider how rough and smelly the streets are, and how small the sheep and cattle are in the marketplace. When a fight breaks out over some stolen goods and the meddlers rush to intervene, you may see how the spirit of the people is so similar to our own, and yet how much the process of managing that spirit has changed. For, if the stolen goods are of sufficient value, the thieves will be similarly tried and hung the same day. This is what makes history so interesting, the differences between us across the centuries, as well as the similarities. Very true. So they deal out punishment immediately for any crime that happens in the market. Whereas for us, there is a process. You have to get caught by the police. The police take you in, they question you, and then you're charged with whatever you're charged with. And then you have depending on how serious the charge is, you go to court, you have to argue it or agree to appeal or agree to a plea deal, or you just accept the charge, and then you go through all that. Then there's a bailout system, and there's so much to our system that is complex. Whereas, boom, 1390s, they're just like, you know what, you did the crime today, nope, let's take you right to court. We're not going to mess around. Here you go. Here's your court date. Here's what's happening. We're trying you right now, and you're being charged and thrown. Tried and even hung, if depending on the. So think about that. You're tried or charged. Maybe you have to pay like a little fee of maybe like 10 shillings, or that'd be a lot actually. Maybe 10 quid or 10 pence. That'll be your thing, and you charge it and you're free to go. Or you have to spend a night in jail, or depending on the severity of what you stole and the value of it, you're hung the same day. So punishment is dealt immediately. Whereas our process in our city, in modern world, there's a longer way. It's a longer process to deal with it all. It's very interesting if you think about it. And here's the last little part here. At dusk, just before the great gates of the city are closed for the night, and you see everyone leaving the adjacent taverns, you may begin to think that Auden was onto something. To understand ourselves, we must first see society differently, and to remember that history is the study of the living, not the dead. Oh, what a well way to put that. Remember that history is the study of the living, not the dead. These people, of course, are no longer in our lives and are long gone, but we study history and we look at history not to understand how they died per se. We understand how they lived and the way they lived their lives. It's really well put. Really, really well put. That is so well done. That was quite a journey to go through, actually. From like the prices here, and finally understanding that the little d was pence and not just some other thing I didn't know. And seeing the wages too of like very typical jobs back then, and how they would barely be able to afford most of the things in the market. It's crazy. And we started off with what was in the marketplace, an area for more of the nobility and upper class, to having an area where your average everyday man would go to try to find a way to get some food and things they needed to repair houses or build or whatever projects they're working on. Then going into the arts of haggling, and we got to read a little excerpt there that was quite funny, where it went from 4 shillings to 7 to 5 based on the conversation and the debate about quality. Very interesting. And then understanding the currency too, where there's so many different kinds of coins that would make up some of the pence. So now that I know the pence thing, we can go through this again real quickly here. The smallest gold coins are the half noble, which has a total of 3 shilling 4 pence. So a small gold coin is worth 3 shilling 4 pence. And the quarter noble is worth 1 shilling 8 pence. So you have the silver and the gold there, basically. Then, so you'd have to use these coins to try to do the math and make up the total that you'd want. And then, alternatively, you will have to make it up from silver coins. So those are 2 different gold coins up there. The full gold coin and the quarter gold coin. Then these are silver coins, and you have the groats, which are worth 4 pence. Half groats, 2 pence. Pennies, half pence, and farthings are worth a quarter pence. Crazy. So you'd have to carry all this little change on you depending on how much you make in a week, and try to figure out how to piece it all together to buy what you need. And there's so many different kinds of coins. That is wild. We have a pretty average system of coins here in Canada, at least, where we don't have a penny anymore. Pennies are gone here, but we have our nickel, our dime, quarter, nickel, dime, quarter, dollar coin, $2 coin, and then it goes to bills. So it's less complex than what they had in medieval England. We've simplified it over the years, which I think is definitely a benefit. I think that would be one thing that, if we compared ourselves now to back then, having a more simplified coin cash system is definitely a benefit. I can't imagine having all these different kinds of coins and trying to do the math in my head and try to buy chicken. That would be really hard. But yeah, imagine too the setting, the way they describe the market too. You've got 3,000 people in a town, and you've double that coming into your town on market days. So you're that crowded in the streets leading up to the markets, trying to get in and out. And then the taverns at night must have a huge profit on market days, because everyone goes to the tavern after, especially merchants, because they've made a huge profit that day. So you have overcrowding on market days. You have a lot of loud, stinky animals, and you have loud yelling customers and action in the streets, loud information being exchanged. It is loud. Whereas our markets nowadays, I think it's a controlled noise. It's not complete utter chaos. We usually keep livestock outside of a farmer's market building or tent area. And then you have your stalls and you walk around them. Or the carts, whatever, if it's an outdoor market, indoor market. And the noise there is maybe some music being played or some form of entertainment playing. And then it's just people talking. And then animals doing their noises elsewhere. Whereas medieval time, they had all of that together. Entertainment, they had people playing, they had the players doing a play. Entertainment, they had the noise, the bartering, the yelling, the animals, everywhere, all of it all together. It's wild. It'd be really exciting if you had the money, of course, to be there and do really well for yourself. But, wow. That is really interesting. So, yeah, that is my reaction to that. So that's a bit of a shopping trip we just did in medieval England. A very unique little article. I'll definitely post it in the description below for you guys, because having these realizations and just the comparison from back then to now is such a unique thing to think about and consider. So let me know your thoughts down in the description below, and think of some other comparisons too that I may have missed, because it is interesting to me. I think the one thing that stays universally the same though is that you keep your market area super clean before people get there. And then when people left, it's a mess. And then you have to clean it up after. I think that's a pretty standard experience across the centuries. Definitely. Because I don't think they would have enough room or time to have people coming in and cleaning up after people. There wouldn't be room if, like, your town is that's bombarded by so many people all at once. You wouldn't be able to have someone sweeping the floor and cleaning up as people went around. So yeah, I think that's a pretty universal expectation when it comes to markets or events across the world is you start out clean, make it look nice, event happens, event's over, and you have to clean up. So definitely an interesting article. I had fun going over it, and hopefully you found this interesting in some form or another. There'll be definitely another unique history coming your guys' way next week. I have plenty of resources and articles to go through, so I can't wait to do some research again. It's been since university, so it's a lot of fun to do this again. So I hope you enjoyed your drinks. I hope you enjoyed a medieval shopping experience with me. And I will see you guys next week for the next unique history. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.